I think the big misconception that a lot of people have about producers is they think producers are people who just find financing for their films.
I immediately fell in love with the story and the script.
We were looking for an arresting image that could be well represented in like a little icon on your TV.
There's something about bad sound that just reads as cheap.
This was a case of bend over and lose your filmic virginity, but you'll get a movie made and your name will be on it.
Anytime there's like that amount of money, there's going to be lawsuits.
There's nothing more important than the safety and the health of everyone who's working on a production.
It was like a passion project. They said, we want your movie. It was a bidding war. It was a major bidding war.
You can't buy that kind of publicity.
Welcome back to Producerville. This is the only podcast that features interviews with independent movie producers, and its mission is to help you become a better producer. This week, we're interviewing Lotti Pharriss Knowles, and she produced the movie from 2013 called Chastity Bites, a really fun horror movie. Lotti's a really good friend of mine. I've known her, oh my God, I think I've known Lotti since 2005, something like that. And we've worked on some things together. This was her first feature film. It was a joy to watch her walk through this whole process. I mean, I've known her all the time. So getting to talk to her about it afterwards at length in detail was really eye-opening for me. There were some things I didn't know. I think the biggest takeaway from this interview is the financing of the movie and how Lotti was able to secure the funds that she needed, and also coming up with different sizes of budgets depending on who she was pitching to. And where she landed and how all of that happened. So if you're going to be raising money for your movie, and if you're an independent producer, that's a key to making your movie, you're going to want to listen to what Lotti has to say. Also, another thing is Lotti shot her movie on Super 16 film. How many people do you know that are shooting on film these days? Now, granted, this was 7 years ago, but still not that long ago. There were reasons why she did it, and she talks about how she was able to get a deal on the film and the camera equipment and all of that. So that's very important as well. So listen up.
Lotti talks about the importance of food to the cast and crew. She also talks about the stress of producing a movie and how she dealt with it. She talks about the philosophy of good, fast, and cheap when making a low-budget independent movie, which is what this podcast is all about. Lotti talks about the challenges of licensing music for a movie and how she navigated distribution, mainly seeing the artwork the distributor originally provided and hating it.
You know, what happens with a distributor is they are responsible for marketing your movie. So sometimes you don't like what they're doing with the marketing of your movie. And I hear this all the time just living in LA. Lots of people are like, oh, that poster or that DVD artwork was so bad or whatever. So she talks about that. She was in that sort of pickle for a little while. All right, well, we will stop talking and enjoy the interview with Lotti Pharriss Knowles talking about Chastity Bites.
Way back in 2004, and it was about a year and change after my husband John and I had moved to Los Angeles from Chicago, where we had been living previously, where we met and got married. And I hadn't really written anything during the first year. I was temping. I was trying to, like anybody new to LA, trying to figure out the lay of the land. And I believe it was a Screenfest screenplay competition that John saw. And the deadline was about 5 or 6 weeks away. And John said, you know what, I'm going to challenge you to write something for this contest. And I thought, okay, well, that's good. That's a kick in the butt right there. So this idea just coalesced over a couple of days of thinking about, first of all, what were some of my obsessions in horror movies that I really liked. And something that came up for me was the strong but villainous real-life character of Elizabeth Bathory, who's been, exploited in different ways in various horror films. And then we were in the middle of the George W. Bush administration, and one of the, many things that was kind of sticking in my craw at that time was abstinence education. And it just came to me, oh my gosh, blood countess. She bathed in virgin blood to stay young. And so suddenly the two came together where, well, what if she was posing as an abstinence educator in Red State America to get her supply?
That's pretty genius.
Thanks. I mean, you know, it just was one of those kind of lightning bolt moments of, okay, so I wrote that script and I submitted it, and it was the first draft. It was really, there are probably, maybe there was about 25 to 30% of that original script that survived. Maybe it was more. I haven't looked at that original one, but it had like a terrible title. It was called like The Blood Countess of Bel Air. And it was... And,
I like that one too, Lotti. That's a good title.
Yeah. Well, my favorite title was Virgin Sluts Must Die, but somebody took me out of that. I wish now, honestly, I had gone with that title, but you know, whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, it was a pretty rough version of what this movie script ended up actually being many years later. But that's how it came to be, you know, alive in its first iteration.
And just to clarify, this was the Screamfest Horror Film Festival?
I'm almost positive it was. Yes.
Okay. You know, one of the questions we have on our list, and we're asking every producer, is how important a title is to their movie. And you just gave us two other ones that are really funny. I mean, I think if you had given them to me and said, which one do you like better? Honestly, I'd be stumped because they're all pretty great. I would have picked Virgin Sluts Must Die. I know I would have.
Yeah.
But so let me ask you that though, just in general, and also for this movie, like how important is a title to a movie? And I'm asking you that in the wake of you also finding distribution and all of that.
Right.
So like how important and how focused should a producer be in getting, like, nailing the right title?
You know, I certainly think it's always important. I'm not sure, because what happened really briefly was after that first screenplay submission, which I heard nothing, by the way, from that, I soon rewrote it, changed the title, sent it to a couple other screenplay competitions that probably don't even exist now. I don't remember what they were.
Right.
And I did get, like, I was like a finalist in one. But then I ended up having a producer come in through a friend to option the screenplay. And for those who don't know out there, option means that someone, maybe they pay you a decent amount, maybe they pay you very little, or in my case, maybe they pay you nothing at all. And they say, well, maybe I got a little, I can't remember. But anyway, it wasn't much. But they make a contract with you that for a certain period of time, they have the exclusive option to produce that project. And so at that point, I was firmly embedded in the Virgin Sluts Must Die camp, but he was coming out of the Hollywood studio system. And he did not think that title would, quote unquote, sell in Peoria, you know, which is kind of the old joke in the industry of how's it going to play, you know, in more conservative areas, that sort of thing. So we ended up changing it, through going back and forth. We settled on Chastity Bites. And by the time his option was finished and it came back to me, it just had kind of stuck, and I stuck with it. The one thing I will say that's great, and you shouldn't force this by any stretch, but one thing that's great, if you have a movie that starts with like A, B, C, or D, you kind of automatically have a little bit better placement because you're at the top of the alphabet. So if ever you're alphabetized, whether it's in like a festival program or a distributor or sales agents, listing, whatever it may, or even if the scripts are sitting on, or sizzle reels are sitting in alphabetical order on someone's desk, it doesn't hurt, let me say. So that was another reason I thought, well, I'm just going to leave it as is.
Interesting. Okay, so all right, we all know that you wrote and produced the movie and your husband, John, directed it.
Correct.
So how did that happen? I mean, I know that he put you up to the challenge to, submit this and get the ball rolling. But did he say, and then I'll direct it? Or did you say, hey, do you want to direct this? And how did that happen? And what were the challenges in general? Because you're in a unique situation. Most producers aren't married, to the director of their movies. So tell us a little bit about all of that.
Yeah. Well, in terms of working together, which we may get to later, but that was great. In terms of him actually directing the movie, there was a process there because I always wanted him to, but because we were both unknown quantities in Hollywood, it was a tough sell. And, you know, at any point when people were coming in and looking at potentially producing it and putting quote unquote real money into it, John had directed shorts, he directed music videos, but the conversation was always, that's nice that your husband wants to direct this or you want him to direct this, but we need to find a name. We need to find somebody with cred if we're going to sell this. And so going through the many iterations of budgets and potential producers and all that, when it finally came down to getting made, it was completely under our purview, under our control. So at that point, there was zero reason to not just say, hey, this is our baby. You know, we've got our own skin in the game in many ways. You know, let's go for it. But that's certainly, you know, that was definitely a hard sell if anybody was involved who was trying to make it at a different level within the Hollywood system, a little bit more that kind of a thing. It's hard for people to get their first break. You know,
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, the catch-22. It's like, well, I need to make a movie to prove myself, but you know, in order to prove myself, somebody has to give me a chance. And so that's why ultimately it is so important to take any resources you have and to make something, you know, to be able to prove yourself. Because usually nobody else is going to, you know, hand you those keys, unfortunately.
Right. So in terms of financing then, did you have an independent financer? Was there one person? Was it 10 people? Did you crowdfund? How did you get the capital needed to make the movie?
Right. So that was another journey where we talked to a few people. We, you know, both when we had the one producer attached who'd optioned it and after, there were some entities that were Hollywood entities and others where the budget was originally, we were hoping for $3 to $5 million. And this also, you have to remember, Hollywood was right in the middle of going through major changes because we're talking about the late 2000s at this point and like around 2010. And so it went from $3 to $5 million to around $1.5 million. I remember we had that budget created for us. And then we brought it down to $1 million and we thought, okay, that is rock bottom. That's as low as we can go. And when it became clear that we weren't going to be able to raise $1 million and all of the producerial options of, you know, outside entities, we kind of run through them all and we were getting really antsy, like we want to make a feature, you know, that was our big goal. So we were extremely lucky. We had an executive producer who had come aboard, who is also our lawyer, named Vladimir Radovanov, who I know you've met, Anthony.
Yep.
Hi. And he introduced us to a guy named Victor Moyers and a bunch of his crew who were out of University of Texas and the Austin film scene. And they had line produced and produced movies anywhere from $250,000 to $10 million in budget at that point. And he said, if anybody can get this done at what you need to make it for, which is $500,000, these are the guys who can do it. And at that point, I think we'd raised $300,000. And I will get back to your, you know, your question about how. So we met with them and they looked at the locations and the cast and they were like, okay, this is really ambitious on $500,000. But you know what? We can do it. So we jumped in with them with both feet and they were amazing. There's no way, I don't think we could have made the movie we made, you know, without them or someone like them who were that smart and dedicated and just knowledgeable. And also just, you know, let's just end it there, and that knowledgeable. So, but the movie ultimately was financed through private equity. I had done crowdfunding successfully for some of the documentaries I'd produced, but I didn't want to do it for Chastity Bites, and I'll tell you why. Crowdfunding can be amazing in certain circumstances. But when I was doing it the first time, it was for the documentary I Am Divine, which was about the John Waters muse. Yes.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the favorite, the wonderful drag queen. Divine is a known entity. Even though Divine passed away in 1987, there is still a rabid fan base of Divine and John Waters fans out there. And so through cultivating that base on social media, that was something I felt like I could successfully crowdfund for, 30,000, 50,000, that kind of thing. With a totally unknown entity like Chastity Bites, it's a very difficult thing, not impossible, but very difficult to crowdfund a lot of money where you're trying to bring people into caring about an unknown property, but then also asking them for money when it's not finished. And, it's one thing to say, hey, it's done and here's a preview and look how cool this looks. And say, will you, rent it on iTunes or will you buy the DVD? And then that's very different from saying, hey, you don't know me, you don't know this project, and will you give me money to make it?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that one shouldn't do that, but it's very, very difficult and would never be my first choice. So, so we just did the private equity route, and we had, I guess, about 10 investors total. And we did the thing that everybody says don't ever do, but we got the mortgage on our condo. We put our own money in. Like, we probably financed, I'll just say a good chunk of it. We were in debt for a while, and we did, we luckily had good strategy for that debt, and we didn't risk more than we figured we could, figure out a plan how to pay back to ourselves so that we wouldn't be ruined no matter what. And thank God, because, we'll get to how much the money didn't make later in this conversation, but we were committed. We were like, we are going to make this movie, one way or another. So that's how we did.
Yeah. I mean, when you're putting your own money, into a movie, you've got to be committed. Like, it's happening at that point. And yeah, it's a huge risk. And, there's lots of schools of thought on that. And, I've had productions where I put money into it to start them. And sometimes you got to, sometimes it is the best thing to do. So,
yeah. And so I took a class with a guy named Stu Pollard. I think the class was through Film Independent, and it was all about how to raise money for a film. It was how to create a business plan. So I learned how to do that. It was very explicit in that business plan that people could lose their money and to not risk more than they could afford to lose. And honestly, it was generous family and friends who, people I went to elementary or high school with who'd done well in life, or my friends of my mom's, like those were the people. I mean, and that's, what you do. And sometimes I think, well, maybe I should have done that movie for $50,000 and had a drag queen playing, Countess Bathory. I didn't want to go that way at the time, but you know what? Now, if I were trying to make it, I think I would do that, because now that's such a valid way to make a movie. And it's kind of the only way to make your money back 9.9 times out of 10. So, $500,000, it's nothing to Hollywood, but most independent filmmakers would agree, like, that's a really high budget and scary to kind of work with on a first feature film, independently financed.
Can you talk a little bit about the casting process and like hiring the crew and all that stuff?
Casting was so much fun. We had these two kick-ass casting directors, Monica Mickelson and Matthew LaSalle. Monica's at Paramount now, bless her. I'm so glad she's making better money like that she deserves now. But at the time, they had this little independent office, but they had done a lot of Rob Zombie's movies. They had done a lot of other films. Yeah. And I can't remember now, honestly, how we got hooked up with them. I think it was through a friend of mine in Chicago who introduced us. And they were just they loved the project. They were super excited about it. They came up with some ideas that we didn't even have to start with. And they called people, we told them who our wish list, was, and then they called in great people. And we knew that we were not going to have the money to pay for a bunch of rehearsals under the SAG contract, even though it wasn't ultra low budget. I think at that time it was low budget, and we had a little bit of leeway because we had a very diverse cast, both in terms of it being mainly female, but we also had a lot of African American, Latinx, Asian American, etc. Actors in our cast. For trying to cast names, we had such trouble. It was so difficult, and we almost thought about doing pay for play to try to get somebody like a Lucy Lawless, but we just kept getting turned down by people like that who had any sort of international appeal or, kind of quote unquote guaranteed appeal for, sales, foreign and domestic. And so we just kept soldiering ahead. We just thought, okay, we had a couple dynamite TV stars who had some following, but wouldn't necessarily help us, with sales at the end, but they were the best for the roles. And then with everybody else, we just went with who came in and knocked our socks off and were ready to go on day one. So we wouldn't have to do a tremendous amount of, rehearsal or things, especially because we had decided, that we wanted to shoot on Super 16 instead of digital to have that experience. Yeah, so, multiple takes, or many takes were not an option. So, so casting was actually one of my favorite parts. It was just really fun to be in there. I like actors, and I always want to make them feel comfortable and appreciated. And they appreciated that, because sometimes I think those rooms are really cold for them to go into. And, we saw all kind of levels of talent and people from, a lot of different spheres of the business. But we have always loved our cast and really lucked out there.
So I wanted to jump back for a second, because you just talked about shooting on Super 16 as opposed to digital, obviously. I'm glad you brought that up, because when I watched the movie, one of the first things I said was like, obviously there's a couple shots like in scenes here and there where you can tell that it's a modern film that was shot, like relatively recently, but like 90% of that movie, I was like, someone could have pulled this clip and showed it to me, and I would have thought it was shot in the 80s.
Oh,
like it just looks like, but immediately I was like, I have to ask, how did you accomplish that?
Yeah, I love that you thought that so much, because that's what I wanted. I wanted this to look and feel like an updated version of the movies I grew up watching and obsessing over, like, Slumber Party Massacre, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, you name it. And it was tough. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, of complications. I don't think I'd ever want to do it again unless I was playing with a lot of someone else's money, who was like, sure, go for it. But I'm glad we did it the one time, because we kind of wanted that old school experience and we wanted that look. And again, so this will kind of loop back into your previous question about hiring the crew. The majority of the crew came with those guys we talked about from Austin. They had this like merry band of awesome crew that kind of went with them from movie to movie. So they were able to just, except for a couple of departments where we brought people in, we were able to, they just brought these folks in. They knew how to work. They had just done a movie that was, I think, $300,000 right before ours. And especially our line producer and our production, our UPM rather, and our coordinator to some extent, they knew how to hustle for deals like nobody I've ever seen. They would have different companies on different phone lines in the office, and they would be playing those people off against each other until they got the best price in a ballsy way that I wouldn't even, I mean, I'm pretty good at making some deals, but I was like, oh my God, like these guys are not kidding. We also got I don't know if you would call it a grant or if it was sort of an umbrella we were working under, but I want to say it was Panavision, and unfortunately John would know more about this, but it was like a first-time filmmaker thing they did where they gave us, I think it was all the camera, the lenses, the equipment, either for a very nominal fee or for free, because we were shooting on film for our first feature. And so that helped obviously tremendously. And then our guys making all the deals for, film developing and digitizing and that sort of thing, allowed all that to happen. But it's complicated, it's terrifying. If you don't get it, if something messes up, we're on such a tight budget every day that you're really holding your breath and praying that nothing, horrible. We only had to reshoot a couple of things that got messed up. And we managed to kind of squeeze those reshoots in. But if we'd had any more than that, we would have been hosed. So.
Can you talk a little bit about the location scouting? Like, how did you find the school that was used? I did some research recently and saw that like one of the hardest locations to find for a film is a school, because typically you have to either find an abandoned school or you have to find a school that where you can shoot at when it's not operating, which is like 3 months out of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of funny because I have gotten myself into situations twice now where I had a school location. One was on a pretty major USC short film that I'd produced before Chastity Bites, and then of course again on this one. And we had a combination, I believe it was 2 different schools. I was trying to think if it was 3, but I think it was just 2. And we went and we looked at so many different places, and so many of them, problems would arise or they'd say no to certain things. So we ended up, I want to say that the main location that was the outdoor stuff in the auditorium was Pasadena Middle School, I believe, or it's Pasadena or South Pasadena Middle School. And you'll have to forgive me for the holes in my memory because, again, we started shooting November of 2011. So this is almost 10 years ago. So I am kind of piecing together in my memory some of these things. But so with that, we had to do weekend. We were there, I want to say, over Thanksgiving weekend. We did a weekend in January after the New Year where we were there, and we had very specific parameters, and in fact ended up getting kicked out of the location when we still had things that needed to be shot, which was
wow,
crazy. And again, luckily managed to finagle a way to get back there, to after the New Year to do the pickup shots we needed. And then there was another little Catholic school that I can't remember its name. It's near downtown. And they were very filming friendly. They were actually an elementary school that we dressed up the hallway to look like a high school. And we had to sort of cheat out the shots of, Virgin Mary statues because we wanted this to be a public high school. And so what they did and what they had done for other shoots is they moved all the kids who had classrooms upstairs and crammed them into the classrooms downstairs because the money, was good for them from shooting. And so for 5 days or however long we were there, they were willing to do that. So that's, so that's where we did the interiors, including the delightful Stuart Gordon. May he rest in peace.
Yep.
He recently passed. And that was the casting thing I didn't mention, that I wanted to have at least 1 or 2 cameos of some kind that also referenced the horror movies that I grew up loving. And so getting him, the director of Reanimator, From Beyond, Dolls, and many more, to play, one of the teachers. And then we had a voiceover from PJ Souls of Halloween, of course, and Carrie. And so those 2 things were also extremely special. Like, I just burst out into tears after Stuart left the set that day. I was so, touched that had that experience had happened.
It was great to see him in it, and he's good in it. He's really good in it.
He's great, yeah. And actually, Anthony, I think I have you to thank for that. Didn't you connect me with Ryan Turek, who then connected me?
Oh yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
So shout out to our Producerville host, Anthony Masi, for making.
You're right. You're absolutely right, because we had interviewed Stuart for a documentary, and
he connected us, and he was not just good in it, but lovely, and we remained friends. And so, thank you very much.
See, that's one of the beautiful things about this is, you're not just making a movie. You're making friends, and it's fun. It's part of your life. Like you live and breathe every single day this project for a while, and you build a family around it. And so, it's something to be said from a producing standpoint, at least I think, is that, you have to enjoy it too. And part of the enjoyment comes from all these amazing people you meet and friends and things like that. So, okay. So you shot on Super 16, which I don't think I know of anyone else I know someone that shot on 35. Like nowadays, if you told me that, I'd be like, why are you doing this live? There's no need.
I probably would be too.
Yeah, but so cool. And like Nate said, it gave it a look that easily it's like, it looks great. I think I'm missing that from movies, personally, is looking at movies and missing the film look,
And also, by the way, with a very, majority female cast, and a lot of the women were, let's say, of a certain age. We had very young women in it, but also some, midlife aged women. It's so much more forgiving, and it makes people look beautiful. And I wanted that, especially because Louise Griffiths, who played Elizabeth Bathory, is naturally gorgeous any way you look at her. But since she's supposed to be this just breathtaking beauty, I wanted to make sure there was no way that we couldn't capture that. So.
Well, I was going to ask you about her because her skin is flawless, Lotti. I was watching this going, the characters are saying it to her, like, what's your secret? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, seriously, she doesn't have one pore. Is it all makeup? Is it obviously she's a human being, so she's got skin. She's a human being,
but she is a genetically blessed human being. Let's be real. I mean, she is absolutely stunning. And I just, watching Kim, our costume designer, I would give Kim these ideas like, okay, reference this from Daughters of Darkness, reference this from The Hunger, and she would go and either make or find these incredible things. And Louise was like this beautiful doll. Like, I couldn't wait to see what's she going to be, what's she going to look like today? Like in that down there, that, she was breathtaking and just such a doll. And so fun to work with. And we thought she was going to be too nice, but she just was like, oh, I'm going to channel my evil side and work with my coach. And she just nailed it. So
yeah, she was pretty sinister, but like beautifully sinister. Like and there was something about her that was so alluring. Okay. So how long was the shoot?
The shoot, I want to say the total days was about 23. And then maybe there were 2 more for some pickup shots, that were out in places like Santa Clarita that had the right look for sort of the nondescript suburban, sprawling feel we wanted. And so that was just, a few crew members and John running around stealing, shots of neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But I want to say principal photography was 23 days.
Okay.
And that was tight with the number of locations, the characters and all that, like I said. But I know people who make movies in 7 days. So in some ways, we were also really lucky that we had that long.
Well, that's a lot of time for 500,000 and really stretch that. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Very, very impressive. So what was just the production was there anything that happened over that 23-day window that stands out to you as particularly challenging, either with an actor or was it every day? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, yeah. Where shall I start? I mean, here's the thing is that on one hand, it was overall a dream. Literally, I mean, I would show up on set and I couldn't believe I was producing this movie, that there were trailers, that we had location, that we had this full crew, and that by and large, everybody was so fantastic who was working on it. And I loved them so much, and I felt so supported, and, wanted to make them feel that way. But absolutely, I mean, again, when you're working on a budget and a schedule that is that tight, every day it's like your movie is circling the drain and you're trying to run fast enough to keep it from going down. And so I would be trying to, spread my fairy dust on set all day. And for those who are old enough or who have revisited this movie called Broadcast News from the 80s.
I love that movie.
Yeah. It was like Holly Hunter in that, where she has this stressful job and she's doing it, but then she's got to go in that corner at some point and bawl her eyes out. So I'm lucky to be alive, because every night on my way home from the set, I would just bawl. It would just be this release of, oh my God, I can't believe I got through this day. And that, sometimes it didn't matter if it was a great day or a horrible day.
Yeah.
Release, and then I would fall into bed and get up early and start all over again the next day. And, that was life. And John and I would go in separately, and, he had his thing. Like we actually barely, we're almost like ships passing in the night, even though we were, because our jobs were so different during production. But, wait, what was the question again?
Particularly challenging situations.
Yes,
but I think one thing that I think you're touching on is the stress. And I mean, it's not just like going to work and coming home. You're constantly stressed, and your way of handling that was to just let it out on the drive home. I just think that's worth noting. I think that if, for those that are listening, you have to be aware that it's going to get to you. I know you personally, and you're a good multitasker.
Thank you, Fergus. Hello, Fergus.
Right. But it sounds like you need these moments of release. Like, you can hold your shit together for a little while, but at some point you got to be like, guys, I'm going to just sit here in the corner and cry a little. And is that kind of how you work on, does that happen in other productions, or is it just this production?
Sure. But this one was particularly because it was so intense. There was so much, not just our own money at stake, but the people that had put their trust in me to give me their money, the number of people on the crew. And, one of the things we did was, we hired people smarter than us. And that's the best advice I can give anybody. And by that, I mean that you hire people in their position who know so well what they're doing in their position. And, that you trust them, unless something really bad is going on. And that was one of the things that happened, which I can allude to without being too specific.
Please.
But, you trust that you have these people who really know what they're doing, because we can't know everything. I can't know how, I was very, at that point, pretty experienced from other projects and being a certain type of creative producer, overall producer. I had done some line producing, but it wasn't my strongest suit. And so having people who are taking care of that and knowing that I'm in good hands with them, really important. I'm not going to know how to grip or light or that kind of thing. I have to rely on, those other people. And I want to make sure, I was talking about spreading fairy dust. I mean, that was really during production. A lot of my role when things were going well, it was pretty much, I only had stuff to do that was super important was when there was a crisis. Otherwise, I needed to be there. I needed to spread fairy dust. I needed to make people feel appreciated. I needed to keep that morale up. Like one of the, John and I were kind of these two captains of the ship, just making sure everybody felt like, yay, this is awesome. And it's going to happen. It's going to get done. And, we're in good hands. And part of the way you do that is you make sure you surround yourself with really good people, and you show them that they're appreciated, so that they're willing to keep working that hard for not a lot of money, day after day. So
right.
Yeah.
One more quick question. How important is food on set?
Oh my God. That's probably at least in the top 5, if not number 1, because especially if you're working low budget. And listen, I'm just going to say this, unless my philosophy is, unless someone is as much of a stakeholder in the project as you are, creating it with you or whatever, you don't ask anybody to work for free. That's just not something I think is okay. Again, if you're a merry band of people all coming together, that's one thing. But don't ask professional people to work for free. Find the budget you can work with and pay people, even if it's something. So, you know, these people were getting paid, you know, decently, but it was still low budget. So it's not like union rates. You know, the only union we were working with was SAG. And so the things that you do to make sure that you're motivating, you know, people otherwise, appreciation, but food is a huge deal. You want a good hot meal every day. If you're going overtime, you are getting pizzas or whatever it is, you are making sure that there's vegan options for the vegans. Most of the crews are not vegan. Most of them want Chipotle every day, and they're cool. But occasionally, you know, cast members, it's a little different. Then it's like a very specific thing. But, you know, yeah, food, having craft services, have, you know, occasionally doing a Starbucks run, whatever it may be. These are very important things that you need to budget for, and you just have to say, look, this is a non-negotiable. Nobody's bringing a bag lunch to set when you're saying, yeah, get here at 6 and work for half your rate that you're making on a TV show, you know?
Right. That's very useful information, because I think a lot of producers don't consider that. They're concerned with the production and the shots and the directors and the special effects, and, you know, food sometimes doesn't get the attention it needs. So special.
But who's creating the shots? You know what I mean? Who's lighting those shots? Like,
right, exactly.
Unless you can do it all yourself and you're doing it on your iPhone, you better budget. And listen, a lot of people are like, I'd be curious to try to make a movie on an iPhone for next to nothing. But, you know, if you're paying people, you know, or asking people, whatever it is, to show up and do the work, you know, treat them like you would want to be treated on a set. So, or better even.
Okay, so one more question about production, and then we'll move into post-production. I wanted to ask you specifically about the challenge you had with special effects. I know in your movie, you know, there's a amount of special effects in them. Nothing that's too crazy, I'd say. But what would you if a producer were listening now and they had a lot of special effects in their movie, you know, maybe you can tell them something that would help them in their discussions with their special effects team.
Sure. Well, I would say for producers, overestimate the amount of time those special effects, those practical effects are going to take. You know, we kind of think about, oh, well, it's going to need to, you know, the blood's going to spurt out of her neck, but then after that take, we have to get her cleaned up. We have to wash her hair. We have to get her back in another shirt. We have to do, you know, reset the entire prosthesis. It is another difficult, time-consuming, and stressful process. It's worth it. And I love practical effects. And actually, I wanted more. Like, there was a CGI thing at the end when Elizabeth Bathory evaporates. I wanted to do that practical so bad. But we just ran out of time, and it is what it is. So we did it, you know, CGI in post. But just know, like, it's extremely time-consuming, and especially if you're working on a budget so that you're, you know, maybe working with younger, less experienced people. You have to, you know, get the one of the greatest sayings that I'm sure other producers will say on this if they haven't already, that, you know, a mantra of independent filmmaking: good, fast, cheap, pick 2. You can't have all, you know. So if you want good and cheap, you can't have fast. So always be thinking about that in your mind. So you have to, you know, really over budget time, because there, and, you know, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and yeah, it's just time consuming. So but worth it, you know, if you want that, again, that old school look. And you also have to kind of, this is a general rule, not just special effects, but in general, there's so many compromises you're going to have to make in order to get the film done, things that you would think you never want to compromise on. But in that moment, when it's do it this way or your movie's not going to get done, you have to kind of suck it up and say, okay, I want to get this movie done and it's not going to be perfect. And I have to let go of that for the greater good of the whole thing. So,
So are you saying like every decision based on the benefit to the movie? In other words, like you said, you wanted to do practical effect for that last scene with Elizabeth, but you chose not to. Was that just due to a time constraint, or?
Absolutely.
It was.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Like we were already going over. We had already. What happened was we wrapped right about maybe 11:30 p.m. on December 23rd, 2011. And we were supposed to have shot the whole movie at that point. People were getting on a plane in 12 hours to go, to England, to Miami, to wherever it might be, to go home for Christmas. And we realized, oh my God, we're not going to be able to get this movie done unless we work all night. And even then, we're going to have an angry cast and crew. We're going to have people missing their flights. It's not working.
Well, also that's a SAG issue as well, right? You would have to.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, and you don't want to run afoul of that. That's a whole other topic. SAG.
That's a whole other.
Yeah, I could talk a lot about SAG, but it's we made the decision. Okay, we're going to have to add a couple days in January. We found a weekend that would work for everybody who was crucial. There were a few crew people we had to switch out, based on availability. But we were still we had a few more days in January to just get that stuff done. And there's stuff that just invariably starts getting cut, or locations, so like that practical effect, or locations. We had a nightmare of one location where luckily we shot the hell out of it, and a lot of stuff that looks amazing in Elizabeth Bathory's mansion but we were supposed to do sort of the finale bloodbath scene there. And for reasons that I won't disclose, let's just say there were personality issues with the owners that came into play. I had, 2 hours one day to find a new location to finish shooting the movie. And I just
2 hours?
Pretty much, yep. So I just went downtown with my production designer and my locations manager to a warehouse in downtown LA. And I said, okay, well, that wall kind of looks like it could be in an attic. There's cement floors, which would never be in an attic, but we don't have time to worry about that. So we're just going to hang red curtains here, have that wall showing. And if people see the cement floor and question why it's in the attic, that's going to be a charming low budget film question for the agent, Can't worry about it. This baby's got to get done. We got to load people up on those trucks and get them down here.
Yeah.
So, these are the kind of decisions you have to make on the fly sometimes when, studio films, they can be like, oh, well, we'll take a couple days off if this happens and we'll go find this other thing. And they'll just throw money at it. That, when you have nothing left to throw at it, that's when you decide, okay, is getting this movie done. And listen, in the end, those things don't matter that much. As long as you have a complete film that makes sense, those kind of things, you like I said, you have to let them roll like water off a duck's back, because otherwise you're going to make yourself really crazy. You're crazy enough already, but if you try to micromanage and control all the things you can't control, use the Serenity Prayer as a producer that they use in 12-step programs,
Right.
Let things, if somebody says, God, I really wanted that shot of a carriage and black horses drawing her up in that flashback. Oh, I can't have any of that. Fine. It's in one room now and the flashback is just here. Gone. You just make those decisions and move on, and it ends up not mattering a hoot really in the end. But yeah, that's filmmaking. Compromise and collaboration are key.
Awesome.
Okay, so the movie's finished, it's shot, in the can, as they say.
Yes.
Can you talk about the editing process, including the sound mix?
Yes, that was all pretty smooth. You know, we edited over, let's see, it was about a period of, or we did all the post-production, I should say, over about the course of the year. We had a fantastic editor, Philip J. Bartell, who I'd already worked with, or I was kind of simultaneously working with on I Am Divine. He edited that as well. And, we were already friends. We had a good rapport. I completely trusted him. And sometimes John and or I would sit with him, but really we let him do his job and have his vision as our editor. And there were suggestions he made. I mean, there weren't a lot of deleted scenes because on that budget, you don't have a lot of fat to trim. But there were a couple scenes that we lost that he just said, you know what, I just don't feel like this flow is happening. And he was right. So we got that cut done. We had tremendous sound guys and composer through this one company. And we also had my co-producer, Wendy Mirabella, was also our, oh my God, I'm having a total senior moment of the person who's in charge of finding original music supervisor.
Right.
Yeah. So what we did, one of the things I really wanted was I wanted new hit bands to remake some old like 80s classics for the soundtrack. I wanted that so badly. Could not afford, because in this day and age, because of the shifts in the music industry as well, they try to remake a song that wasn't even that well known from the 80s. I think it was $40,000 to the rights, and it would have been more if we used the original. But to have another band record it, $40,000 for that one song.
That's insane.
Oh yeah. So that was out. So I just again had to trust, that we were going to get some new cool indie bands who were willing for a low licensing to. We found incredible bands who were so cool, and we were probably better off doing it that way. But again, that's one of those, I always go back to I know this is a cliched story, but when people talk about Jaws and how Bruce the Shark didn't work that well, and they had so many problems, it was so frustrating, so they had to get creative, and it's probably a better movie because of it. I really do think compromise also breeds creativity. And sometimes you find actually, I think pretty much always, if you embrace that, you can find something better out of what you're compromising on. And, if you just let go of okay, I cannot have that first choice I want. Is that really the most important thing in this movie? No. Okay, moving on. So yeah, so the music was another one of those. But yeah, we had wonderful sound mixers, composers, bands who came in on the soundtrack. We had a great color correction studio that we got a good deal with. So all the post was really smooth and much more relaxing than production.
Did you have to do any reshoots?
No, only that weekend in January. So it was right after the holidays, so we had wrapped, like I said, December 23rd. We came back for 2 days around January 15th, I want to say it was, and did shot. It wasn't even reshoots. It was just shooting the scenes that we didn't get the first time. And that was it. And then we had the actors come in to ADR, which is, if needed, which is sometimes if the sound isn't good for certain things, which it was, we had a great sound guy, so it was pretty good. But sometimes things get lost in on-set sound, so you need people to come in and do those lines in the studio with their, against the video of their mouth moving, so that you can have, a crisper take. So we had, a few actors come into the studio for that, but that was it. Oh, also John wanted to do his own Foley. So, and that's when you do some of the sound effects. So,
Right.
So he went into the studio where our sound guys were working, and they provided him, with the watermelons and the hot dogs and the carrots and the, all the things that are like, what's the sound of, the knife or that flies across the room into the one girl's head. Okay, we're going to do it with this, and so I know that was really fun for him to be able to.
So John was like slicing up watermelons and stuff?
Yeah. He had an apron on, and he just was having a ball, just recording
So cool.
sound effects for death and other things, in the movie.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Such a huge undertaking. I mean, all these little, it's every, you see and hear a movie, so it's got to look great and sound great. Those are the two things. And, those like smashing watermelons and stuff, every little bit of it's important. And so,
and I would almost say, this is my opinion, I think that sound is maybe even more important than look in terms of giving a movie a professional feel.
I've thought that too. Yeah. Why do you think that? Why?
There's something about bad sound that just reads as cheap. Now, I love it when I am watching like a giallo movie where like everything has been ADR'd, the dubbing is terrible. Like if you want to do that, then like commit to that, I would say. But if you want your movie to feel professional, maybe, more than look, more than a lot of things, put your money toward the sound and make sure you get good, clean sound to work with, because otherwise that's a real tip off of like, oh, this was made for a dime.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd say 100% agree. Okay, so you finished your movie, it's edited. Let's talk about distribution and marketing. Did it get a theatrical release? And, how did you find distribution and all of that? What was that exciting chapter like in Chastity Bites?
Right. So we did the festival circuit. Of course we had the hopes, maybe we'll get into South by Southwest, or one of these. We didn't. But we ended up having a really fun premiere at a festival that consistently gets ranked as one of the best filmmaker-friendly festivals, which is called Dances with Films here in Los Angeles. So we had a midnight premiere screening at the Chinese theaters in Hollywood. Really fun. It was great to premiere actually in LA.
I remember that. I went to it. I was there.
Yeah. And we had a little red carpet. It was great.
Awesome.
And, we'd hired a publicist who was very helpful in getting us some press, especially with the horror outlets. But we also had some angles like LGBT, and so we got some press in that arena as well. And so that night after actually it wasn't that night, it was like the closing night party, we sort of courted our digital distributor at the party, which is Gravitas Ventures, and ended up signing with them eventually to distribute our film digitally. And we also had a sales agent that we went with. Sales agents, I'm not going to say their name because here's the thing. They were actually excellent, and people can reach out to me individually if they want to ask who this was, because so many sales agents are totally dishonest and will rip you off, and so be very careful. The only reason I'm not mentioning their name is because knowing what I know now about the distribution landscape for independent and low budget films, it's almost better to just distribute yourself unless you have a very specific type of goal in mind, or go through an aggregator like Quiver or some of the other ones that will take just a flat fee, put your movie up on all the platforms. Because the reality is that most distributors nowadays that you're going to end up with, unless you're in that very lucky small percentage of filmmakers who make some extraordinary deal with a distributor, that's launching your career into, this next level. Most of the time, they're not going to put any money or effort toward marketing your film. You're going to be marketing your film yourself. And so, you might as well just keep pretty much 100% of the money you're making on Amazon Prime, wherever it lives. But I will say that our combination of our foreign and domestic sales agents, they did get us a Showtime deal. So we ran for 2 years on Showtime, and boy, everybody thought we must be a huge success when that happened. But it was really cool that we had that deal, but the money was not good because, again, right now there's so much content out there, or so many films being created, so much content being created, that the distributors don't have to pay you much for it anymore.
Right.
There's all these outlets out there. They all want the same stars. They all want the same names. So in a way, if you're going to do stuff independently, just keep it independent all the way through. Our theatrical, quote unquote, was festivals. And then we rented out a movie theater that I'd been going to since I was a kid in my hometown, so that we could do a screening there for a ton of like my friends, my family friends. A lot of our investors were up there too in the Bay Area. So, so festivals, great fun, just kind of target, a selection that you hear good things about. Most of our experiences at the festivals were really positive. There were a couple that were complete duds and waste of time and money, Right. But that's a fun part of the journey, especially when you're starting out making a film, is to go and experience it with different audiences. Yeah. So we did that. So we premiered on digital then. So we were traveling on the festival circuit, I should say. Premiere was in early June 2013. We traveled kind of into the fall. Toward the end of 2013, we premiered on digital. Then the DVD and Showtime came out in kind of early to mid 2014. And let me say one other thing. Unless you're going to press your own DVDs or get, employ somebody to make them, and you just, have them put them together, and then you pay them for the physical product and try to sell those, or Blu-ray actually would be better because those are more sought after now. Don't even bother getting a DVD distributor if they even exist anymore. It is a complete waste of your time.
Yeah.
Have a lot of these distributors, beware, they have what they call a marketing cap. What a marketing cap is how much money of your profits they don't need to pay you until a certain amount, which is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 minimum, will be recouped for them for their quote unquote marketing expenses. Yeah. Like creating new artwork that they think they need to have created to sell your film, which usually sucks donkey balls. I said it.
That was the original name of the podcast, but we'll switch it back.
Yeah. I mean, pardon me for being a little vulgar there, but seriously, the British DVD artwork, oh my God, it was these girls in Catholic schoolgirl uniforms, girls who weren't even in the movie, who were vampires. We didn't have Catholic schoolgirls or vampires in our movie. And
wow.
That's the cover art. And then, by the way, that British distributor went bankrupt, evaporated into thin air, owing us over $10,000. So be very careful and know that a lot of things could go wrong. Be very careful who you get into bed with in terms of distribution. Otherwise, just commit to the fact that you're not going to make a lot of money on this and you just want to get it out there. You're going to have to market it yourself anyway. So just control everything yourself.
Yeah.
If you come
Can I ask you, one thing that I love about Chastity Bites is the artwork. And you just mentioned now about, I'm so glad you didn't go with that Catholic school bullshit because, what are they thinking? I think you nailed it.
Thank you.
It's a gorgeous drawing. I love the hot pink. I think one of the things in horror movies is typically you're led astray by crappy artwork and trailers, like misleading trailers. But it's the first thing people see along with the title. And I think that if somebody were to see Chastity Bites and watch the movie, they would understand the artwork. It's almost like it was appropriate, but it was also visually exciting. It was honest. It matched the sensibility of the movie. So how involved were you with that? Who did that artwork, that amazing artwork? And
I love our artist for that original poster. Nathan.
Well, how did you, or what, I guess the main question, and I don't mean to interrupt, but my main question is, how did you as a producer get that? I mean, because at some point it doesn't exist. It's just an idea. So what conversation did you have to say, here's what I'm after to produce that result?
Yeah, and the specifics of that, again, are 7 years ago, so or more. So my brain is probably not, I'm not going to remember the details, but I know that we really like Nathan Thomas Milliner's artwork from a lot of the special edition of the Scream Factory DVDs covers that he'd done.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so we're friendly with Jeff Nelson over there at Scream Factory. We asked him to put us in touch, and he was excited we could work with his rate. And I think we just had him watch the movie, and we just talked to him about, look, we shot on Super 16 because we wanted there to be, even though there's sort of this modern topic, we wanted there to be a throwback feel. I think we gave him some posters as references of, older movies like from the 80s, 90s, whatever, that we were kind of like. And so he did some sketches. We chose from those. And I'll tell you, everybody has loved that artwork. And so it was a super bummer, at least on the digital platforms. The icon representing us in all of those is his artwork. But the DVD, nope, they wouldn't use it. They thought they were smarter. And part of that marketing cap was creating the other artwork. In Great Britain, the only way people know it in Great Britain is through that terrible Catholic school. We had one female horror journalist in England who's awesome, and she wrote like a whole article that was basically like, yay, this movie is coming out in England. The artwork sucks. Please look past it. And this is not the filmmaker. So, I didn't want to piss off our distributors, but I also was so happy that she, wrote that, because when we saw that, our heart just sank. It's like, why do you, it's almost like some cliche in a movie where some dumb marketing guys are like, yeah, this is the shit. This is going to sell this. And you're sitting there as a lifelong horror fan, having been among horror fans your whole life and knowing what they'll respond to. And, it's frustrating, but those are some of those things that if you are turning your movie over to other people's hands, that's something you lose control of contractually. But you know what? The poster that Nathan created is what most people associate with the movie. So great, what the hell? Like that's what I consider to be our artwork, and the hell with the rest of it. So
yeah, it's funny because obviously being a horror fan myself, but just kind of knowing what most horror fans want. Like they all yearn for the days where as simple as VHS, they just use the theatrical poster on the art, and that's what people want. That's what Scream Factory does. They know, it's like people know now that's what fans want. They want that original artwork that they associate.
Or they create something updated that still captures the true spirit of it. A lot of Scream Factory movies, they'll have both. They'll have like a reversible cover where you
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too, because it's like cool. I like a lot of the artwork they do, but it's also nice to have that, that other option. So yeah.
So looking back in general, is there anything, and it can be anything from when you first got the idea until today, is there anything you would do differently?
No, because it was all part of my learning experience. So to me, I think it's and this is not saying this is not saying that's a stupid question, because there are no stupid questions. I am just saying that I don't believe in regretting anything, especially because we did. Maybe I would feel differently if we hadn't finished the movie and if it hadn't gotten out there. Are there things that it would have been nice if they'd happened differently, or had gone easier, or we had, been able to make our money back. Like all those things, of course. Like, and I'm not saying there weren't days where I was, depressed about those things. It was heartbreaking at some point in 2014 for me to realize, like, oh my God, we did try to do everything right. We did our own social media. We did so many things, and this is kind of financially what it's come to. But now, and fairly quickly after that, you get over those things and you realize, there's a lot of stuff in life in general, but certainly in this business, you cannot control. And at the end of the day, if you would ask me if I could go back and have not made that movie and had not, have that mortgage to pay off or whatever, there's no way I would do it, that I would go back and take the money back or whatever and not make that movie, because
right.
the experience of it, the fact that it does live out there and that years later and for many years to come, it'll keep getting discovered randomly here and there by horror fans who stumble on it or hear somebody talk about it. There are people, when I was doing more active social media, there's the people who thought, would tweet that it was the worst movie they ever saw, the stupidest thing. And then there were the people who said it was their favorite movie they'd ever seen, and everything in between. And that's the thing. When you're creating something, it's that entire range. And you have to just kind of live then like, okay, this is the life of that film. And I had to do it not just for whatever the end result was, but for the entire journey. And that entire journey was totally worth it. And now I've made a feature horror movie, which was the dream of my whole life. If I never do another one, it's okay, because, I hope I do, but, I feel like I got to live a dream that not that many people got to live. And did it turn out in every single way how I wanted it to? No, but nothing in life does. And so,
right.
You learn from those things, both that worked and that didn't. And yeah, that's
incredible.
what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, you basically climbed Mount Everest. That's exactly what you did.
It is kind of,
Yeah.
Except, you're not leaving like human excrement on a beautiful natural, monument. So living your dream and going for it, it's an amazing thing. And just be in the experience on the good days and the bad days, and because it may never come again, or if you do make other movies, it'll never be the same, and it'll never be your first one ever again. It's like your first love or something, so just be luckily I had the wherewithal most of the time, not always, but most of the time, to be fairly present in making of it and to kind of revel in those steps.
Yeah.
And the days when I was really down about this or that, well, then you move out of it at some point. You lick your wounds, you have your down days of eating Ben and Jerry's, and then life keeps moving along. You kind of forget the bad stuff. You know what I mean? Like you just remember the good.
I find that too, that all the bad stuff kind of disappears because the end result is so beautiful that it kind of, takes over. That's what overshadows the negative stuff. And there's negative stuff in every horror movie. I mean, every movie experience, nothing goes smoothly 100% of the time. But, when you think about Chastity Bites, you're probably not thinking about all your crying, blubbering in your car. You're thinking about the movie and how fun it was.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and honestly, I would rather, too, like if somebody said, well, the making of it could have been much more horrific and you could have had a lot more interpersonal problems and all that, but had the movie make money, I wouldn't trade that either, actually, because I'm so glad that the making of it got to be such a joy that I feel like, well, I'm a big girl. I can deal with, whatever level of disappointment for a while until I kind of put it in its right place, so I honestly, like, there are so many things I look back on and I'm like, oh my God, we were so lucky that we worked with those people and we got to do that. And so, yeah, it's my baby, you know, and your child, you know, you can't control how your child turns out. But you should love them unconditionally.
Love that. Love that. What are you working on now? Anything exciting?
Well, interestingly, I am finishing up another documentary with the same documentary filmmaker I've worked with for over a decade, Jeffrey Schwartz. And it's a documentary about one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Showgirls.
Right.
One of mine as well.
Yay, Nate! Very good. Yeah, not exactly horror, but kind of. I find there's a lot of horror fans who also love that movie, so that's pretty cool. So, and that's kind of like my, other than Chastity Bites, it's sort of like another dream for me, because my husband and I had like a Showgirls themed wedding in Las Vegas. Like, we're huge super fans, and it kind of was one of the big things that brought us together. So working on that is super cool. But interestingly, right now, I'm kind of taking a break, and I just started online courses for a totally new career. I have gotten to the point with filmmaking where I'm kind of ready to take a step or two back and move into something else where I feel like I can kind of have more impact in the world. Because I think for a long time I felt like, oh, well, you can have social impact with the art you create, but if you keep bumping up against obstacles from making that art that you want to create, then it can be discouraging. And I've been really responding recently to the statement or the adage that says, if at first you don't succeed, try again, and then quit. There's no use beating your head against the brick wall. And I don't think of myself as quitting, because I'm never going to stop writing. I'm never going to stop being creative. But I do feel now, and I think it's good to say this publicly, because other people do feel this way at times. And I think there's shame involved with it. It's like admitting failure or something.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need to say, you know what, this lifestyle is really hard. It is so hard to find financing or someone to, I mean, Anthony and I we went through something recently like that, with a project that we loved. And so right now, like I said, I am still writing. I am still working on a Showgirls documentary, but I am also exploring a new career that's using my brain in a new way that I'm really excited about. So that's me.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your candor on that, because it's true. I think when you say there is a little shame involved, I think there's a level of being jadedness out here that I think a lot of people, those jaded people aren't saying to themselves, holy shit, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. And that's what goes through my mind. Like I'm still having a blast. I'm having fun. I love it. And so I'm not at that point. But I can't say it won't happen to me. But I think as long as you have a quality of life, and, producing this movie sounded really exciting for you, and it was something you had to conquer. And now you're finding out that you want to add something else to the equation.
Yeah. I would never, first of all, tell anybody else how to, what choices to make with regard to pursuing one's dream. We all have to kind of make those determinations for ourselves. I know for me, I am in general a happy person, and bitterness is not a good look for me. And I have not hit the point of bitterness. I still have tremendous appreciation for all the projects I've done. I'm grateful for all the projects I've worked on. But I could start to see bitterness like up around the next corner or two. And it took me a while. I had to work through, like I said, some of that shame of like, oh God, if I don't do this anymore, what are people going to think? Well, it's none of my business what other people think of me. I have to take care of myself, and I'm still going to be a fan. I'm still going to cheer other people on, and I hope to come back to producing at some point. It's never going to leave me as a passion or a skill set, But in order to rekindle that passion, I have to kind of step out of it for a while and, allow that part of myself to kind of regrow a little bit by letting it sleep. Like it needs to hibernate a little bit while my brain does something else. And then when the time is right, then that part of me will wake back up and say, hey, I want to come out and play again. And, there's time in life for that, hopefully. So, so that's sort of my giving a big hug to people who feel like they're at the end of their rope. You know what? If you are, take a break, do something else. There's a lot that in the world that needs doing right now. There's a lot of good stuff that's worth fighting for, and creativity will never leave us. It's always going to be there as an option, but self-care is super important, and knowing when you are just beating your head against that brick wall, that you got to take care of yourself. So that's even if you're staying in it, and if you're just going through a rough patch, but it's not time to get out, you have to figure out a way just to take care of yourself and not get burnt out, because it's easy to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Lotti, we can't thank you enough for talking about your amazing Chastity Bites, and Producerville. The producers that are listening, our goal is to get them to be better producers just by hearing the experiences from producers like you that actually made a movie. And so thank you. Your comments were valuable. We love you for coming on here. Is there anything else you want to say as like a parting goodbye? Or
just I am always happy to support other people in their journey, and so people can reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, that kind of thing, and if they have questions or they need some support, I'm very happy to offer whatever I can in that realm. And so whatever you're going through out there, fellow producers, I've probably experienced it. I get it. I'm sending you all my love and good energy, and I wish you all the best. But I also wish you amazing learning experiences that just keep growing.
All right. Well, Lotti, thank you so much.
I'm just like a little Buddha, aren't I? I'm just like a Buddha. Like the elder stateswoman. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much. This has been really fun to have this conversation.
As I said, Lotti is a really good friend, and isn't she so fun to talk to? Like, you want to sit down and talk with her for you want to have a glass of wine and just yuck it up,
Yeah, absolutely.
She's so fun. So letting everybody know, Lotti and I also worked on a really exciting project with Drew Barrymore's company, Flower Films, called the Black Rose Anthology, which was a television horror anthology that featured 1 hour episodes only written and directed by women. And we had, worked on this for a couple of years, and we finally got in front of CW and they wanted it. And we developed a script with them for a year. And as, commonly happens in the business, it didn't happen. But we were so close to working together on that. And we had a blast working on it and seeing it, get traction. And it was just so exciting pitching it and everything. So anyway, I've been around with Lotti. She's a dear friend. What was your favorite part of the interview?
I thought it was fascinating, all the little things that she talked about, some of the little details that, you might not hear from the average producer, such as the importance of food. When she first started talking about that, I was like, well, how important could that be? But what she said really made sense.
Yeah, food is a big deal, and I think you learn that as a producer the first time you do it wrong. It's like, oh, pizza? Pizza again. That's kind of like this universal symbol in the industry, as the producers don't know what they're doing if there's pizza on the table. So anyway, another quick lesson, a little story. I was producing a 5-night shoot up in Acton, California, and the only restaurant nearby was a Subway. And so I figured, well, for 5, I'll just go get Subway for everybody for all 5 nights. So I
right, why not?
Right, exactly. It was the only restaurant, right? And we were in the middle of nowhere. So I went to Subway and I got their menu and I typed up kind of a little 1-pager thing that was put your name on top and write what you want on the line below. And then so I would, like, before the shoot, and then I would make sure we'd have our runner or something go to Subway and buy all these subs. Well, the first night it was fine. Everyone loved their Subway. The next night it was like, oh, Subway again? I'm like, yeah, it's the only restaurant. By the fifth night, there was like a pile of subs on the middle of the table. Like, people ordered them, but they were not eating them. And they were like bringing their own food. And I watched over the course of 5 days, people get sick of the same thing every night. So that was my, like, kind of little lesson about how important food was. But
I think I could eat Subway 5 days in a row.
You think so?
Yeah, I think I'd be all right.
But people are literally looking at me, and these were like, I had worked with this crew actually before, so I was friendly with them, and they were like, oh, Anthony, I just can't have another sub. And I'm like, there's no other restaurant. And so so the next shoot I did with this team, I actually had a really cool catering company like come at like 1 o'clock in the morning and deliver like amazing food. And, so, you learn these things. That's why you're listening to Producerville, everybody. So anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Next week's episode, we will just sort of keep as a surprise, and we'll see you next week. Bye.